Today we're looking at first place deck lists from Japanese City League events in the post-rotation standard format. I've organized the data here to see the meta share of decks from February 1st to March 2nd at Japanese City League events. Now note that this is not the full meta share, this is just the share of all decks that got top 16 or better, because that's the data that was available to me. So every archetype listed here will be featured today, and we'll be looking at a first place deck list from these archetypes. And we'll begin with Dragapult EX, which is the most popular and also most successful deck so far in the Japanese post-rotation standard format at these City League events. We're looking at a Dragapult Dusknoir deck list here. So this will look pretty familiar to those that have been playing Pokemon pre-rotation. You know, Dragapult's a very good deck in pre-rotation as well. We have the new Brock card here, which can search for either 2 basic Pokemon or 1 evolution Pokemon. And players are looking for a replacement for Lance, since Lance is such a powerful supporter card searching for 3 dragon Pokemon, but it rotates out. It's no longer in standard format. So we'll see players replacing those slots with either the new Brock card or with Jock, or a combination of Jock and Brock. Of course, Dragapult EX is so powerful for a few reasons. One, it has a great Stage 1 in Dracloak with the Recon Directive ability. And 2, Dragapult EX's Phantom Dive is a very efficient attack, doing 200 to the active and then 6 damage counters spread across your opponent's bench however you like. And that gives a lot of room for creativity with the damage counter placement and planning out massive multi-knockout turns throughout the game. Of course, Dusclops and Dusknoir provide really great support for Dragapult EX, adding some more damage with the Curse Blast abilities, and you can also use these Dusclops or Dusknoir, which give your opponent a prize card. You can kind of use them to force Counter Catcher and Defiance Band into being active. So if you're even on prizes and you pop a Dusclops or Dusknoir, you can now use Counter Catcher or Defiance Band, giving your opponent a prize card. And we can't forget about Badoo. Badoo's Itchy Pollen is going to be a really important thing to remember about the standard format. It is pre-rotation, and that will still be true post-rotation. Badoo's Itchy Pollen doing 10 damage. Your opponent can't use items. It's a really great attack when you're playing a deck that wants to have some extra time to set up. Badoo is fantastic for slowing down the game a little bit if your opponent is heavily relying on item cards, so that you can evolve up into your evolutions. Now, this was the more mainstream version of Dragapult, but I also wanted to show a first place list of Dragapult with Xatu. We saw Dragapult Xatu last year when Dragapult first came out. We saw this being played in Japan, and it never really caught on as being the better Dragapult variant, or even really a good Dragapult variant. But since it has earned first places at City Leagues, I definitely wanted to show this, that it is a variant of Dragapult, although I do not think that this is going to be the premier version of Dragapult, and it's not personally the version that I would choose to play. We then have 2 kind of subcategories of Dragapult. We're going to start here with Dragapult Charizard. So Dragapult Charizard, Oscar Madsen has popularized this. He wrote a metafied guide about it, and I believe he got 9th place at EUIC with Dragapult Charizard. Of course, now this is post-rotation, but the reasons why these cards are good together still stand. Dragapult and Charizard share an energy type, so Infernal Rain can be your energy accelerator. That means you're not relying on Crispin or Sparkling Crystal to get that Dragapult attacking from 0 attachments to 2 attachments, so Infernal Ring can do that for you. But also, Dragapult EX, Phantom Dive, it's kind of a tactical attack. You're not one-shotting big important Pokemon with Phantom Dive usually. You're only doing 200, which I know, only 200. But compared to Charizard, Charizard can get up into the 300 plus range of damage. So Charizard is great for dealing with something immediately when you need to. Of course, we also have Dusclops and Dusknoir to allow Dragapult to kind of technically take one-shot KOs. You know, do a Curse Blast, put 13, and then do Phantom Dive 200. But the Dragapult Charizard both complement each other with Charizard's aggression, and then Dragapult's kind of tactical damage counter placement, also having Dracloak for good support with Recon Directive. This version of Dragapult, though, is deemed as being clunky, usually, because where you might have extra support Pokemon like Pidgeot or Xatu or extra Badoo, things like that, you have another line of an attacker. So, be that as it may, I still think it's a strong combination, but some people don't like it because it can be deemed to be clunky and a little inconsistent with the moving pieces and extra evolution cards. And then we also have Dragapult Thorns. So this version, it's a first place list. Like I said, we're only looking at first place deck lists in today's video. This is Dragapult Iron Thorns, but it's also playing a 1/1 line of Xatu. It's playing a 1/1 line of Feraligatr, which can't be hit by basic EX Pokemon. And then it's also playing one Lily's Clefairy. So Lily's Clefairy EX is a card that we will be talking about for multiple decks today. And it's an interesting card to see included in here. So the ability Fairy Zone is a nod to the Fairy type, which no longer exists in the TCG, saying the weakness of each of your opponent's Dragon Pokemon in play is now Psychic. So it lets Lily's Clefairy hit Dragapult for weakness, Raging Bolt for weakness, with its Full Moon Rondo attack, which is the same attack that we've seen on Suicune Entei and Raikou V, 20 damage plus 20 more damage for each benched Pokemon. So it's interesting to see this in a Dragapult deck. That's not really where we're going to be used to seeing it at in the lists today. Because it also makes your own Dragapult weak to Psychic, which is interesting. This whole deck list does kind of look like a bit of a mess, but I want to find the ideas here and kind of give you guys like the strategy, what this deck builder was probably going for. So Iron Thorns Dragapult has been a thing. It's good because you can lead with Iron Thorns, shutting down your opponent's abilities while you evolve all of your Dracloaks, attach energies. You know, your Volt Cyclone synergizes kind of well with Dragapult because you can use Volt Cyclone to swing, and then you send the energy back to Dragapult, and then if the Iron Thorns gets knocked out, you send up your Dragapult. It already has one energy attached to it. And then if it's the same Pokemon you hit with Volt Cyclone, the Phantom Dive can now clean it up. Then we've got the Xatu for some energy acceleration and also some draw power. Again, I don't really like Xatu. It has to be very specific. You have to attach a basic energy from your hand to one of your benched Pokemon. So Pokemon has to be on the bench. It has to be basic psychic energy. Xatu's another stage 1 that you have to evolve. So I don't really enjoy Xatu too much. And then, like I said, the Feraligatr EX is there because it can be a wall and also an attacker. Its ability Armor Tail says it takes 0 damage from basic EX Pokemon, so that could be really good if your opponent has no answer. If their whole deck is basic EX Pokemon, they have nothing that can hit through Feraligatr's ability, then you could just solo entire decks with Feraligatr, which is pretty neat. A high count of Crispin in this deck to get energy onto the board, especially since they're playing a lot of different types of energy, and we'll be seeing Crispin around a lot in the post-rotation standard format. It's a pretty good card. And then the last card I want to point out here is the Lily's Pearl tool. If the Lily's Pokemon this card is attached to is knocked out by damage from an attack from your opponent's Pokemon, that player takes 1 fewer prize card. So it essentially turns Lily's Clefairy into a single prize Pokemon as long as it's knocked out by damage from an opponent's attack, which is really good because Lily's Clefairy EX is already good without this tool, so the tool just adds to it. Moving on to Raging Bolt EX. So the core of Raging Bolt EX is Teal Mask Ogerpon with Teal Dance to accelerate energies onto your board and draw cards. Professor Sada's to accelerate energy specifically to your ancient Pokemon, which is typically going to be 2 Raging Bolts. And then Raging Bolt's Bellowing Thunder is the main attack, which will discard the energies you accelerated with Sada's and with Teal Dance and your manual attachment to do 70 times the amount of energies you choose to discard. So this is a big basic, try to do big damage kind of deck. You want to aim for going for 3 2-prize KOs, just attacking least amount as possible because you're doing max damage all the time with Bellowing Thunder. In rotation, this deck did lose some of its draw power, like Pokestop and Radiant Greninja, so that's being replaced here by the 2/2 line of Noctowl. Not necessarily draw power, but Noctowl is an incredible card. The Jewel Seeker ability really doesn't cost much. You just need to evolve a Noctowl and have a Terra Pokemon in play. Then you get to search for any 2 trainer cards. So fantastic ability, and I'm not surprised to see that being the way to run Raging Bolt in the post-rotation format. Next, we have one of the coolest decks in the competitive meta in post-rotation, which is the Noctowl Tera Box. You might already know about this deck because Tord Reklev played it at the recent Champions League Fukuoka to a top 16 finish. Here we're looking at a first place deck list from a City League for this deck. So the core of the deck, you'll see that it greatly uses the Noctowl line. There's a 4/4 line of Noctowl and 2 Fan Rotom for searching those out. And then there are a myriad of Terra Pokemon, because of course we need a Terra Pokemon on board to activate the Jewel Seeker on Noctowl, but this deck is also utilizing Sparkling Crystal, so you can use all of these different attacks for 1 less energy of any energy type. So we have Teal Mask Ogerpon EX, of course, for its Teal Dance ability that accelerates energy onto the board, which we can use with Energy Switch to move around to other Pokemon, or keep it on Teal Mask itself. And it has the Myriad Leaf Shower, which does cost specifically 3 grass energy, but like I said, we could use Sparkling Crystal to just make it cost 2 if we ever needed to. And Myriad Leaf Shower is a great attack for hitting Pokemon that are weak to grass, namely if Charizard EX has 2 energy on it and your Teal Mask has 3, you one-shot the Charizard. Then we have Wellspring Mask Ogerpon EX. The Sob attack can be used to like go for a Sob win condition. Like if your opponent just can't remove a Pokemon from the active, Sob can stick it there for quite a while. But Sob can also just be nice to slow down the game in a similar way that Badoo sometimes slows down the game. So if decks are relying on Latias EX's ability that gives all basic Pokemon free retreat to get out of the active and switch their Pokemon, and they're not playing a lot of cards like Switch, then Sob is going to stick it there because it doesn't matter if it has free retreat if it can't retreat. And then Wellspring also has the Torrential Pump attack, which can be really good for taking out multiple small Pokemon at the same time, like knocking out 2 Dreepies or 2 Charmanders or 2 Hoot-Hoots, things like that. We have Pikachu EX with the Resolute Heart ability, which makes it really difficult to one-shot KO. You have to get it with like a special condition or move damage onto it prior to hitting it, or just 2-shot the Pokemon. And it has the Topaz Bolt attack that does a whopping 300 damage for Grass, Lightning, Metal, which is an awkward energy cost, but you do have the Sparkling Crystal, and we are playing also 3 Crispin in this deck to help us out with the awkward energy costs that come along with these Terrastal Pokemon. The last Terra Pokemon in here is Terapagos, so you could use Unified Beatdown, of course, for just 2 colorless energy, or 1 energy and a Sparkling Crystal. And it also has the Crown Opal attack, which does 180, and during your opponent's next turn, prevent all damage done to this Pokemon by basic non-colorless Pokemon. So let's say your opponent is playing this deck, but they're not playing a Terapagos in it. They wouldn't have any attackers except for Noctowl that could, I guess Fan Rotom could hit them, Blood Moon Ursaluna, but like if it's early game, they're not going to be able to power up the Blood Moon Ursaluna maybe. So the Crown Opal attack is pretty interesting, but I honestly don't think you'll be using it too much. Typically, you want to use that Terapagos for the Unified Beatdown, mostly because Blood Moon Ursaluna is pretty popular. It's a really easy Pokemon to just toss into a bunch of decks, so that's a good one for getting around the Crown Opal, and probably a good reason to not rely on Crown Opal walling out your opponent. It's not all about Terra Pokemon, though. Like I said, we got the Blood Moon Ursaluna. This is really just a big basic toolbox deck. Also, that Lily's Clefairy EX that I had already mentioned. And, of course, a Badoo for good taste. Why not? And you'll notice, like I said earlier, 3 Crispin in here. We saw Crispin in the other decks. Crispin seems like a very, very high-value supporter card in the post-rotation format. Next, we're looking at Charizard EX. So here we have a first-place Charizard Pidgeot deck list. And the first thing I want to look at is this Chi-Yu, because when I was collecting deck lists for this video, this Chi-Yu stuck out to me. So it has the Flarebringer attack, which can accelerate energy, 2 basic fire energy from your discard to one of your Pokemon. And it also has the Mega Fire of Envy that does 140 damage if any of your Pokemon were knocked out last turn by damage from an attack. So this Chi-Yu might just be one of the best ways to get around walls that Charizard EX can't get around. So if we're dealing with Milotic that can't be hit by Terra Pokemon, if we're dealing with Cornerstone that can't be hit by Pokemon with an ability, if we're dealing with Mimikyu that can't be hit by EX or V Pokemon, then the Chi-Yu is a way around that. And the wall-style decks were incredibly popular and incredibly successful at the early stages of Japan's post-rotation format. If you even go and look at the Champions League Fukuoka results on Limitless, there were a lot of wall decks there too. So it makes sense that we see these kind of decks popping up in lists, and especially in successful lists. Charizard Pidgeot is going to work the same way that it always has. You have two of the strongest stage 2s in the game, probably ever printed, going at the same time. Pidgeot can search for any card you need every turn. Charizard self-sustains its energy, and it also has a really great attack. The main issue is if you run into a turn 1 Badoo item lock, that could be a problem, which is why the deck plays 2 Charmeleon and a Pidgeotto and 2 Technical Machine Evolution. Some people choose to ignore Badoo and not play all these extra cards to counter it, but it really depends on which matches you're okay losing and how popular you expect Badoo to be. Then we've got Charizard with Noctowl and Pidgeot. So what I've seen from the City League data so far is that it seems more common, or that it is more common, for Charizard decks to play both Noctowl and Pidgeot instead of just one or the other. So we'll see here, there's a thick line of Noctowl with a 1-0-1 line of Pidgeot. Sometimes you'll see like a 2-1-2 line of Pidgeot and then like a 1-1 or 2-2 Noctowl. So combinations of Noctowl and Pidgeot are very common right now in Charizard decks over there. And this will also be playing 2 Terapagos. So this is really like kind of a Charizard Noctowl deck, and the Pidgeot is just there as extra support. Of course, using those Terapagos as an easy Terra Pokemon to get down onto the board, so you could use Jewel Seeker, because if you don't have your Charizard down yet, you can't use Jewel Seeker, and you're probably using Jewel Seeker to get to your Charizard. So that's why the Terapagos is so important, and it's also a great attacker. You know, attach a Fire Energy to it turn 1, a Jet Energy to it turn 2, get it up into the active. And of course, like I said, you need it there on the board so that you can use your Noctowl Jewel Seeker. So this is going to be focused around how powerful Charizard is. It accelerates its own energy. It does a lot of damage with Burning Darkness. We've got all of the good stuff about Charizard Pidgeot in here, including even the Dusknoir line. So this list looks very strong if it functions well. It's not playing Arven. You'll notice that Arven is seeing a decline because Lumineon is gone, and Rotom is gone, and Forest Seal Stone is gone. So those cards are part of what made the Arven engine so strong. We'll have to see if it comes back. Also notably, of course, this list is not playing TM Evo. It's going to be using Jewel Seeker to get your rare candies, so it needs Arven a lot less. Then we have a first place Charizard Dudunsparce deck. Now, this one, again, I'm showing first place deck lists, but they're not all as good as one another. So I don't think that this is going to be the way to play Charizard, but it could end up being it. So I wanted to make sure I show this deck list to y'all. So again, Charizard EX, very strong. We don't have to go over that card, but the Dudunsparce with the runaway draw ability, you can draw 3 cards and then shuffle this Pokemon back into your deck. It's a really efficient way to draw cards, and it also leaves you with more space on your board. So, you know, you might have 3 Dudunsparces on your board, but then you could pop all your runaway draws and then replace them with Duskulls. What's also really cool is that the Dudunsparce EX is coming out, and it has the adversarial tail attack. For 1 energy, it does 60 damage for each of your opponent's Pokemon EX in play, which can really add up against some of these Terra decks that are using Area 0. And what I love about the Dudunsparce EX is that you wouldn't really want to play it as like a 1-1 line, but since the Dudunsparce with runaway draw is so good for drawing cards, you could just toss 1 Dudunsparce EX in here and your opponent will never know if it's coming. The A-spec of choice for this deck is Enriching Energy, because you can attach this to a Dudunsparce and then activate runaway draw, and then the Enriching Energy gets shuffled back into your deck to use again at a later time. So that's the cool thing about Enriching Energy plus the Dudunsparce, is that you attach it, then you activate Runaway Draw, and you put the Enriching Energy back into the deck for later. And then I also wanted to show this first place Charizard deck list, which is definitely teetering on the line of Noctowl Tera Box. If you just say that Charizard's just another one of the Teras in the Tera Box. They're also running a 101 line of Dusknoir. Since they're already running rare candy for the Charizards, why not put a 101 Dusknoir? You could also maybe, instead of the 101 Dusknoir, put a 101 Pidgeot EX for the same kind of reason. You're already running the 3 rare candy. So this one's going to look a little more like that Teal Mask Ogerpon Tera Box that we had looked at. Except with Charizard EX line in place of the Teal Mask and Fire Energy in place of the Grass Energy. So definitely a cool, interesting deck list. I haven't started testing with these decks yet. This has kind of been my data collection week, so that's why I'm sharing this with you guys in the video today. But let me know what y'all think about all these different variants of some of the decks, because it's very cool. Post rotation is always an exciting time to see what people are coming up with. Then we have Gholdengo EX. Gholdengo EX seems like a real powerhouse, both pre-rotation and post-rotation. Pre-rotation, it finally started getting some of the competitive respect it might have deserved for a while now. It's a really great card because it's a stage 1 with pretty good HP, an ability that draws 1 or 2 cards, and then an attack that can one-shot anything. Then this one is pairing it with the Dudunsparce and the Dudunsparce EX, like we were just talking about for that Charizard EX deck list a moment ago. And Gholdengo, what's cool about it is it runs the Energy Search Pro, which searches your deck for a basic energy of every type and put it into your hand. So Gholdengo decks already play a basic energy of every type, which means slotting something like a Monkey Dorian that needs dark energy is really easy for this archetype to do. With this next Gholdengo list, you'll see the 1-1 Scizor line. So the Scizor line can be kind of strong. It's a little awkward to set up when you only play the 1-1 of it, so you're not using it in every game. But it's great against wall decks. So if your opponent has Cornerstone Mask Ogerpon, you can't hit that with Gholdengo. If your opponent has Mimikyu, you can't hit that with Gholdengo. So Scizor is kind of a nice, easy answer for that stuff. And then separately from Gholdengo is Gholdengo Dragapult, which is a real deck, and allow me to explain. So Gholdengo EX is a stage 1 Pokemon with a draw ability on it. Dracloak is a stage 1 Pokemon with a draw ability on it. So you basically get this 6/6 line of 6 basics and 6 stage 1s, and all the stage 1s draw cards, which is great. We're already off to a good start if you're drawing cards with all the stage 1s in your deck. Then Dracloak, one of the stage 1s, evolves into Dragapult EX, which is one of the best attackers in the game, has no weakness unless your opponent's playing Lily's Clefairy EX, and it can spread around an efficient amount of damage. So Gholdengo EX is great against the decks that you want to just one-shot them. So against other Dragapults, against things with high HP that are trying to be tanky, against Archaludon, Gholdengo EX is going to be great against that because of its attack that can one-shot anything. Dragapult EX is going to be good at cleaning up knockouts that maybe you missed earlier, or knocking out smaller HP Pokemon, or getting 2 Phantom Dives in and getting 4 prize cards out of the combination of 2 Phantom Dives, something like that. What's also cool is that Dragapult EX gets walled out by Milotic, but Gholdengo EX doesn't. So Gholdengo EX has that kind of ability to answer one of Dragapult's counters. And then if you need to deal with Mimikyu, you do have the Dracloak's Dragon Headbutt, which can deal with Mimikyu as well. Next is Archaludon EX. So this first Archaludon EX list is using the Dudunsparce and the Dudunsparce EX. We're seeing that that's a pretty popular draw engine that players in Japan are trying out in post-rotation, much more commonly than they were prior to the rotation. And Rocky Helmet's in here, a card that we don't see too often. If the Pokemon this card is attached to is your active and is damaged by an attack, put 2 damage counters on the attacking Pokemon. So that could be nice against something like Pikachu EX with a Resolute Heart. You know, the Rocky Helmet does that ping damage for you. Or against Pokemon with 230 or 240 health, you hit them with Metal Defender for 220, then they hit you back, and if you have that Rocky Helmet on, they get knocked out. Not too sure where I stand on the Rocky Helmet. I just kind of want to explain some of the reasoning why the player might have included that in this deck list. But Archaludon, in general, is a very self-sustaining Pokemon, high HP, accelerates energy, solid attack, reminds me of Charizard a little bit in that way, that it's high HP, accelerates energies on evolve, and it has a good attack. All that's built in. And then you also have the Relicanth with Memory Dive that gives you another good attack, right? Raging Hammer from the Duraludon. So the Relicanth Duraludon or Archaludon combo gives you a real powerhouse of an EX Stage 1 Pokemon. Then we have another first place list here for Archaludon using a 2-2 line of the Hops Dubwool, which says when you play this Pokemon from your hand to evolve one of your Pokemon, you use a Boss's Orders effect. Switch one of your opponent's bench Pokemon to the active spot. So you gust up a Pokemon, which is very, very strong. You're doing it with a single prize Pokemon, which is nice. So you're not putting like additional liabilities onto the board. Like in pre-rotation, you would use a Lumineon to get Boss, and now you have a 2-prizer sitting on your bench. Hops Dubwool does it without needing to search out a Boss. Just evolve it, gust something up, and it's a single prizer. So that's really nice. And it also works nice because Archaludon plays Professor Turo's Scenario, also will sometimes play Scoop Up Cyclone as the A-Spec of choice, so you can even use that for picking up your Hops Dubwool to reuse it again next turn. And we'll also see the Scizor here, probably for getting around the wall Pokemon like I mentioned earlier when we saw Scizor in the Gholdengo deck. And then we have an Archaludon EX Zacian EX, or Hops Zacian EX, I should say. So this one's kind of a hybrid between Hops Zacian and an Archaludon deck. It even leans a little bit more towards being a Hop deck, I would say, because it plays the Post-Wick Stadium, which says attacks used by Hops Pokemon do 30 more damage to the opponent's active. It plays Hops Bag, which searches for 2 basic Hops Pokemon and puts them on your bench. It's playing 3 Hops Choice Band. Attacks used by the Hops Pokemon this card is attached to cost 1 colorless less and do 30 more damage to your opponent's active Pokemon. This tool is very, very strong, by the way. And then, of course, the Hops Pokemon themselves. You got Snorlax, which its ability does the same thing as the Stadium. Your Hops Pokemon do 30 more damage. You've got Hops Cramorant. If your opponent doesn't have exactly 3 or 4 prize cards remaining, this attack does nothing. So when your opponent's at 3 or 4, you have this easy-to-use Whimsical Spit attack. And then Hops Zacian EX, the main Hops Pokemon. The instant slash attack is so sick because with a Snorlax, a Stadium, and a Tool, this attack does 120 to the active and 30 to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon for 0 energy. Because don't forget that Hops Choice Band does not only buff the attack, it also makes your attacks cost 1 energy less. And then Brave Slash does 240, but again, if you have the Stadium, the Snorlax, and the Band, this does 330. And that's mostly what I think the Archaludon is here for, is accelerating energy in one burst onto the Hops Zacian. But you could also attack with Archaludon as well. And they got 1 Turo in here, so you could reuse that Archaludon maybe. And then I want to take a look at what a Hops Zacian focused deck looks like without the Archaludon in it. So you're going to see a lot of the same cards. The Stadium, the Hops Choice Band, the same Hops Pokemon. That's all going to be core to the deck. But what's interesting here is they run 0 metal energy. So they are never, ever, ever planning to attack with Hops Zacian's second attack. They're only using the first attack, and it can attack for free because of the Choice Band. Cramorant can attack for free because of the Choice Band. The Dark Energies are mostly for Monkey Dory, for attacking maybe if your opponent has a Jamming Tower in play and you need the energy because the Choice Band isn't working. But also because you could attach them to Blood Moon or Saluna, but really going to be used for the Adrenabrains. And they even have Energy Switch in here, so you can like attach to a Dory Adrenabrain, Energy Switch to the other Dory Adrenabrain there too. So a neat damage spread kind of deck. They're also running Technical Machine De-Evolution because they're spreading damage around with that first attack. And then they're also running Calamitous Snowy Mountain. Whenever any player attaches an energy card from hand to one of their basic non-water Pokemon, put 2 damage counters on that Pokemon. And this is actually good for you, because if your board has no damage on it, you can attach an energy to Monkey Dory and it puts 2 on it, and then you could Adrenabrain that 2 somewhere. So maybe if you didn't have any damage on your board, use this Calamitous Snowy Mountain to add damage to your board so that you can then Adrenabrain it off. Next, we have Gardevoir EX, and this one takes a huge hit from pre-rotation. It loses Refinement Curlia, which was the draw engine, so that really hurts. So now your Raltses and your Curlias, they aren't really special anymore. You just need the Gardevoir EX because it accelerates energies, and it's also a great attacker. Of course, Monkey Dory helps it be a great attacker, because if you Psychic Embrace 3 energy onto it, 6 damage counters, you get an Adrenabrain twice to remove all that damage. Gardevoir EX decks in post-rotation are playing Brilliant Blender because they lost Kirlia and Radiant Greninja for getting energies into the discard pile. So Brilliant Blender is there to just get 5 Psychic Energy right into the discard pile. Other than that, we'll see Gardevoir decks using Screamtail and Drifloon just like they have been. Badoo is in and out of the deck lists. Mew EX, which had been in Gardevoir EX decks at some point, is now back in some of the deck lists. And of course, Lily's Clefairy EX, because who doesn't want to one-hit KO a Dragapult? Moving on to N's Zoroark, another one of the owner's Pokemon decks. N's Zoroark has the trade ability, which Zoroark GX back in the day had. Discard your hand, draw 2. It's basically the same thing that Kirlia Refinement had, which is funny because we were just talking about that. And then Zoroark's attack is Night Joker. Choose one of your benched N's Pokemon's attacks and use it as this attack. So N's Zoroark as an attacking deck can really only ever be as good as the other N's Pokemon are. Luckily, there's 2 pretty good N's Pokemon to copy attacks from. One of them is N's Darmanitan, which does have to evolve from N's Darumaka, so it's a stage 1 Pokemon. And the main attack here is Hydreigon Cannon. Discard all energy from this Pokemon, and it does 90 active and then 90 to one of your opponent's benched. So it's almost Water Shuriken. And we do have reversal energies here, so a reversal energy can completely pay for the cost of Hydreigon Cannon, or you can just use Night Joker on Zoroark to copy the Hydreigon Cannon. The other N's Pokemon we have to use here is N's Reshiram, which has Powerful Rage, which is great if your Zoroark gets hit and not knocked out. You can then use Powerful Rage. And it also has Innocent Flame, which just swings for a vanilla 170, which if you don't want to use Hydreigon Cannon, you don't have damage on your Zoroark, then the 170 swing attack is going to be just fine. There's 2 ways to accelerate energy in this deck, one being the Power Glass tool. At the end of your turn, if the Pokemon this card is attached to is in the active, you may attach a basic energy card from your discard pile to it. And then the other one is N's PP Up. Attach a basic energy from your discard to one of your benched N's Pokemon, so do note that it has to be a benched Pokemon. And I also want to note that they play Pecharunt EX in here, but they don't play Binding Mochi. I do see Binding Mochi around in a good bit of N's Zoroark EX decks, so that is worth noting, although it's not in this list. Next is another Noctowl Tera Box deck, but this one is different enough that it definitely needs to be its own. It's an Evolutions, typically focusing on Flareon EX Noctowl Tera Box. So Flareon EX is an awesome Pokemon, but we want to look at the Eevees first, actually. So Eevee with the ability Boosted Evolution, as long as this Pokemon is in the active, it can evolve during your first turn or the turn you play it. So that means if you have Eevee in the active, you evolve it up into Flareon EX, which we're going to look at in just a second, and then you use Crispin, you can start attacking with Flareon EX on turn 1. And Flareon EX's first attack, Burning Charge, does 130. Then you search your deck for 2 basic energies and attach them to one of your Pokemon. So this is just nuts if you get to do this on turn 1 because of the Boosted Evolution plus Crispin, Burning Charge, 130. So you get to attack with a 270 HP Pokemon, and you accelerate more energy to the board. You can also do this by using a Sparkling Crystal plus energy attachment, so it doesn't even need to specifically be with Crispin. Then the Sylveon EX is also in here, and mostly going to be for its Angelite attack, which says choose 2 of your opponent's benched Pokemon, shuffle those Pokemon and all cards attached to it into your opponent's deck. This is amazing if your opponent has, let's say, 1 Dragapult EX and 1 Dracloak, and no other Dreepies or anything. And you could just force the Dragapult to the bench with, like, a boss bringing up something different, and then Angelite your opponent's Dracloak and Dragapult into their deck, and then they're left with no Dragapult line. I mean, you could compare that outwards to any evolution line, but that's just the first thing that comes to mind on how to use Angelite. And I should also note that if you have Lily's Clefairy EX in play, which says the weakness of each of your opponent's Dragon Pokemon in play is now Psychic, Sylveon EX's Magical Charm will one-shot a Dragapult and take 100 less damage from attacks next turn. So maybe you're not even Angelite shuffling them in because you could just Magical Charm knockout. I also want to note that earlier in the video I mentioned that Lily's Clefairy made the weakness of all Dragon Pokemon in play Psychic. I think I said that, but it is not all. It's just your opponent's Dragon Pokemon. So if your opponent wants to hit your Dragon Pokemon for Psychic, they're going to have to play their own Lily's Clefairy. I also wanted to note this supporter card, Cyrano. I've never even seen this trainer, this character. But search your deck for up to 3 Pokemon EX, which is pretty good specifically for this deck. You've got the 2 Wellspring Ogerpons, and you've also got the Eevee EX. So you have these 3 Tera EXs, and you need to have one of them on the board for your Noctowls to work. The Eevee EX, of course, can evolve into any Pokemon EX that evolves from Eevee, but it doesn't have that evolution cheating effect like the regular Eevee does. Then we've got Slowking. So Slowking, this looks like a clunky, messy, kind of gimmicky deck, and I think it's because it is. I don't think this is actually going to be a top meta deck, but this is a first place list, so let's take a look. Slowking, the Seek Inspiration attack. Discard the top card of your deck, and if that card is a Pokemon that doesn't have a rule box, choose one of its attacks and use it as this attack. So you will use the Academy at Night Stadium card to put a card from your hand on top of your deck, and then discard that card, copying its attack with Slowking. Slowking does cost 2 energy to use, so you've got 2/2 Xatu in here, so even if Slowking gets knocked out every turn, you could still potentially chain Slowkings, and you also have reversal energy too. The attacks that you're going to be copying with that Seek Inspiration are Kyurem's Trifrost, which does 110 to 3 different Pokemon. So that attack, if you get that off like turn 2, that could just win the game right there. Just knock out 3 Charmander, 3 Dreepy, whatever it is, 3 Hoot Hoots. Just clear the opponent's board with Trifrost. That could be pretty broken. Then we also have Conkeldurr with Gutsy Swing that does 250. We have Regigigas with Jewel Breaker that does 330 to a Tera Pokemon, and also Annihilate, which has the Destined Fight attack. Both active Pokemon are knocked out. So those are the choices of attacks you have to copy with Slowking's Seek Inspiration, and that's what the entire deck is built around doing. Next, we have Feraligatr. So this is a first place City League deck list, but Feraligatr Milotic actually won the 5,000 person tournament, the Champions League Fukuoka that I had mentioned that Tord got top 16 in. A deck just like this won that major event. Now, I do think that with this deck on the map and its use of walls being Milotic EX's Sparkling Scales, it says it can't be damaged or affected by attacks of Tera Pokemon, and Mimikyu's Safeguard ability, players are more aware of this strategy, and if players are using things that get around Milotic EX, like I mentioned, you can play Gholdengo Dragapult, and then if they want to wall your Dragapult with Milotic, that doesn't work. If they want to wall your Gholdengo with Mimikyu, you can also attack the Mimikyu with the Dracloak. Another example I saw is like Luxray and Reversal Energy to one-shot Milotic. You could just toss Luxray Reversal into a Dragapult deck maybe. So there are plenty of ways around these walls, and Feraligatr definitely preys on decks that are not able to get around Milotic or able to get around Mimikyu. But this is a very, very awesome deck, and I don't think I've gotten a chance to talk about it on the channel yet. I love the use of Relicanth to make your Feraligatr this 3 attack, 1 ability Pokemon. Like, it just seems like such a powerhouse. So you get Totodile's Big Bite attack, Croconaul's Reverse Thrust attack, and then of course Feraligatr's Giant Wave. And they can all get buffed by Torrential Heart, which puts 5 damage on yourself, and then you get to do 120 more damage to your opponent's active this turn. And you can also Monkey Dory that damage from Torrential Heart off, so you could really toss a lot of damage around and do some pretty big things with Feraligatr. Next is Ceruledge EX. Ceruledge EX, a pretty straightforward and, in my opinion, boring card to play with. The Abyssal Flames attacks does 30 damage plus 20 more for each energy in your discard pile. So this is aiming to early game be one-shotting like basic EXs, and then late game be one-shotting like stage 1 and stage 2 EXs. New cards that this deck is using, it has a very thin hops package. So it's got a 1/1 Hops Dubwool, 1 Hops Cramorant, 1 Hops Snorlax, and then it also has 1 Postwick Stadium for the Hops Pokemon and 1 Hops Choice Band. So I actually like that they're adding a little bit more here into the Ceruledge. So it's not just Abyssal Flames all the way, adding a little more substance, a little more tech and strategy into this list. So very cool take on Ceruledge. Again, I don't think Ceruledge is that great, but cool list nonetheless. Here we have a first place Froslass Espathra EX deck. So Froslass has the Freezing Shroud ability, During Pokemon Checkup, that's between turns, put 1 damage counter on each Pokemon that has an ability. And this works so incredibly well with Monkey Dory, of course, because you're going to be putting damage on your opponent's Pokemon, you're going to be putting damage on your own Monkey Dories, and then you could use Adrenabrain to move that damage around how you see fit. But Dew is really good for slowing down the game with item lock, so you have plenty of time to spread damage around and set up multiple Frostlasses. This Maractus is pretty cool. You can use Corner to trap a Pokemon in the active, and then you can kind of like pick a Pokemon that you want to knock out this Maractus, so that when they knock it out, because they're trapped, they can't retreat, they knock it out and they take 6 damage from the Explosive Needle ability. So I thought that was a pretty cool idea for this deck. And then, of course, they've got Espathra EX in here. The ability Dazzling Gaze, as long as this Pokemon's in the active spot. Attacks used by your opponent's Pokemon cost 1 colorless more. And Psyball does 30 damage plus 30 more damage for each energy attached to both Espathra and your opponent's active Pokemon. Now, I know I said I was only featuring first place deck lists today, but Hydreigon EX was part of that Metashare breakdown I did, and I could not find a single first place Hydreigon EX deck list. So here is a second place Hydreigon EX deck list from a City League, and this list definitely looks clunky. For Crispin, very cool to see, trying to get into that Obsidian attack. Which does 130 and then 130 to 2 other benched Pokemon. So Hydreigon EX, great card, awesome. It looks cool, has good attacks, high HP. The energy costs are very difficult. But what they're doing here with this variant of the deck is using Iron Thorns EX in a similar fashion that Dragapult Iron Thorns was using it, so you could set up your board. However, the problem is that Dragapult comes with its own draw engine in Dracloak, and Hydreigon does not have that. So they're also using the Dudunsparce engine for drawing. Next we have Mamoswine EX. So Mamoswine EX, stage 2 Pokemon with 340 health, huge Pokemon. The ability Mammoth Carry, once during your turn you may search your deck for a Pokemon and put it into your hand. Pretty nice ability. And then Reverberating March does 180 plus 40 more for each of your benched stage 2 Pokemon. So you're aiming to just 2-shot most things, but you can get up into 1-shot range. This deck plays Luxray, which is a stage 2 Pokemon that can be played directly from your hand to your bench, as well as Klinklang, which can also be played directly to your bench with its ability. Other stage 2 Pokemon we have Pidgeot EX, the best one to toss in when you just need a stage 2 Pokemon because its quick search ability is great. And then there's also a line of Garganackle with the energizing Rock Salt. Once during your turn, you can accelerate a basic fighting energy from your discard to one of your Pokemon, and you get to heal that Pokemon for 30 damage. So I don't think this is a high tier deck or anything, but it did get a first place at a City League, so I'm really happy to share this. Next, we've got wall style decks. So next we're going to look at 2 different wall deck lists. So this is the common looking one. You've got a line of Milotic, a line of Farigiraf, and then some Cornerstone Ogerpon. The 4 Crispin are there to help you start attacking with these things fast, and so that you can play a combination of energy cards for your different attackers. The A spec here is quite interesting. Pokevital A, deal 150 damage from one of your Pokemon, and it's an item card. So the Pokevital A is good because if your opponent has just like one kind of Pokemon that can attack your Farigiraf or your Cornerstone or your Milotic, and you can knock that out eventually, and then it takes some time to power it up, and then you knock out the next one, the Pokevital A can be the difference between one of your walls kind of tanking for another turn or going down and potentially losing. So very interesting because it's a low value card. You know, it only heals one time, it can't be recycled or anything, but it might just be the perfect A-spec that this kind of deck needs. The second wall deck list I wanted to look at is just Mimikyu and Cornerstone. 4 Mimikyu, 2 Cornerstone. Almost looks like a Snorlax style deck without Snorlax because Snorlax rotated. And they're also using the Pokevital A-spec here. And the last deck list we're going to look at in today's video is Terapagos Noctowl Boufallant. So this was kind of an archetype when Terapagos first came out, popularly being played with Pidgeot EX and or Dusknoir EX as well, but we'll see none of the rare candy users in this version of the deck. So Boufallant with the Curly Wall, and then plus Bravery Charm, it helps your Terapagos EX be pretty tanky. Terapagos EX also, of course, is going to be forced to not use double turbo energy anymore because double turbo energy rotated. So its attack will be doing just a little bit more damage now that you're using basic energies and jet energy to attack, or maybe even an energy plus a counter gain to attack instead of double turbo. Pretty straightforward deck. You know, you're going to be using your Noctowl to search for the trainers you need. Your Terapagos is your main attacker. Monkey Dory works well because you're playing Crispin and a combination of basic energies. And then you've got Blood Moon Ursaluna as a really efficient attacker as the game goes on. I hope you enjoyed the video today, looking at a whole bunch of post-rotation first place deck lists from Japanese City League events. If you enjoyed today's video, be sure to subscribe for more Pokemon TCG content, and you can check out my educational services for the game, like one-on-one coaching and my complete competitive Pokemon Masterclass at the links down below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time here on Celio's Network.